Hi tutors! Today we're going to talk about affixes and roots. Why should you teach affixes and roots? Well, we know statistically that English language learners are way behind in their number of the vocabulary words that they have in English. So it's always important to increase vocabulary knowledge and word base. When students know basic root words or prefixes or suffixes, they're better able to read using context clues and to determine the meaning of unknown words. Many affixes and root words come from Greek or Latin, so if your tutee is someone who speaks Spanish or French or Portuguese or some Romance language, they may have overlapping cognates, so words in English and their native language that really mean the same thing, and that includes affixes and root words as well. And focusing on cognates does help to increase their comprehension and acquisition rates of English. With our higher literacy students, so let's say literacy 3, and our basic students, the best way would be to start with prefixes, because prefixes don't change the part of speech of a word, and there's generally not a lot of spelling rules that apply when you add them to a word. So we're really focused on meaning and not as much on spelling or grammar. So for literacy and basic students, that would help them more. So you could start by teaching definitions of simpler prefixes. Don't get into anything too complicated. And demonstrate how they change the meaning of a word. So let's say your prefix is un, which means not, or generally the opposite. To undo something, the opposite. You could focus on a word that they know already, like happy. We add un to happy, we get unhappy. What does that mean? Not happy. Okay, so here's just an example of how you could work with your student and show how it changes the meaning of a word. So then we would look at a list of words and maybe underline the prefix un or just identify it in one way or another. You would then work with the student to help them create definitions for words that contain the prefix, like unhappy means not happy. In general, it's probably better for them to know the root word already, like the root word happy, or it should be easy for you to define so that the work isn't twofold. You're really focused on the suffix and changing meaning of a word and not on trying to understand the whole thing put together. And then you could create and define new words together. So I'm going to show you an example of what I have done in the past. Okay. So first you want to define what your suffix means. So we were talking about un. Un means not. So I have my cheat sheet down here. None, or the opposite of, okay? X would be out of or away from. Miss, wrongly or bad. Non, not. Okay, so we would have them write down on a piece of paper. This is what I would hand out in person to my students. What these word parts, what these prefixes mean. I think this is a lot. I would probably say focused on no more than 3 because that'll be enough, trust me. And then identifying words that have the prefix. So here we have illegal, we have exhale, mistake. Okay, keep the words a little simpler than this because for high literacy and basic students, this might be a little bit more complicated and difficult for them to understand. But for the sake of identifying the prefix, these words are okay. And then to define the words based on the root word, which students should already know, circle, and then the prefix, n. So when you add n to circle, what do you get? So our definition here, into, within, near, okay? So think near circle or into the circle, okay? Ex-president, away from presidency, okay? Anyhow, and have students work with them to help them create the definition for some of these words. Non-stop, that's a good one for higher literacy and basic students. Unhappy, mistake, okay. And then have them come up with their own definition with less support so you can see if they're able to apply the skills on their own. Unclean, miscount, ex-wife, imperfect. Okay. There are some other activities that you can do that really help with building skills related to prefixes, affixes. So you can have students do a word hunt, help them find words and reading passages with that target prefix, and then define or explain what they think that word means. So here's an example down below. Tom had to rewrite his paper. He was unhappy. It was unfair that he had to redo his paper. Okay, so we can see that re is one of the prefixes, un, then further down dis and miss. So I like how this example, they highlight the word so you can actually see it. It kind of stands out a little bit. And then based on the word parts and the sentence itself, see if they can come up with a definition of what they think that word means. They can write words in very simple sentences that can also show they understand meaning. Or you can create affix cards with them. I tend to like color-coded cards because we can see root words, we can see prefixes, we can see suffixes, and each of them having their own color kind of helps. You would put them together and form new words. On the back, you can add a little definition. So if the prefix is miss, you can add what that miss means, like mistake, incorrect, okay, or do it again, again. And then have students put these together and form new words and create a definition for those words. Okay, now with level 1 and above, you can start to add suffixes and root words. These are a little more complicated because first off, suffixes actually change the part of speech of a word. So students need to understand the different parts of speech. What's a noun? What's a verb? What's an adjective? What's an adverb? What's a pronoun? I guess not for this, but and they also need to understand how each of those parts of speech function grammatically in a sentence. So really, it's with level 1 and above that you really start to know, students start to be able to more independently understand how sentences are put together. The second reason you would want to teach suffixes and roots to level 1 and above, is because root words come from Greek and Latin, and in general they tend to be more complicated, more academic in nature. There's more to them. So for a lower level student, they'll just be harder to decode, to read, and to understand. So it's better to teach them to more higher level students that have some skills that they can use to work on these areas. How do you teach suffixes and roots? Well, first you got to discuss the meaning of the suffix or the root word. Then you would, for suffixes, explain how they sometimes change the part of speech of words, so they're used differently in the sentence. You would then have them identify words with the suffix or root word in them. And then working with the student, you would help them to create definitions for words containing the suffixes or root words. So let's look at the root word aqua. Aqua. Aqua means water. Okay, so if we add aqua to ium, we get aquarium. And ium is like a place, so like a place of water. And we know this is like a museum for aquatic animals. So we can start to look at how, if you see the word or see the root word aqua, we know it has to do with water. So once we define words, we can create and define additional words or new words. So I'm going to give you another example that I've done with my students, my higher level students. Okay, so ER. When we add ER to a verb, we change it into a noun. Okay, so adding ER suffix to the end of a present tense verb makes a noun. So someone who does that action. Okay, so a thinker is someone who thinks. We add ER to the end of think, we get someone who thinks, a thinker. And then we can also focus on some spelling rules, because often that is something that does apply when we add suffixes, not so much with prefixes, but for sure with suffixes. So if you have a short vowel followed by a consonant, you need to double that last consonant before adding ER. If the verb ends in E, we just add the R. So bat becomes batter, joke becomes joker. A batter is someone who bats. A joker is someone who makes jokes. Okay, and here we can have them form new words, add ER, based on the context cues in the sentence, context clues. I work in a bakery and I bake bread. I'm a baker. Sam really wants to be a whatever when he grows up. He likes to teach people. So we can assume teach, we add ER, we get teacher. I'm not a great blank, but I like to golf on the weekends. We take golf, we make it golfer. Okay, so this is a really nice activity, where they change words by adding the ER, and we can see how it goes from a verb to it becomes a noun. And then you can do a dictation if you'd like. So dictation, the important aspects of dictations is that most of the words that you are using, that you're having students write, are words they're familiar with, like the or cat, just to give a couple examples. And then the new words are the ones that end in ER. So they should be able to write down an entire sentence and just really focus on that new spelling pattern, the new suffix that you've just taught them. And then they can create definitions for words that end in ER. So we know that a manager is someone who manages. An explorer is someone who explores. Okay, so they would create definitions of these words. All right, so here are some other activities that you can do with suffixes and root words. You can fill in a word sort chart. Students would identify words in a text containing the suffix or root. They would explain how words with the suffix or root act similarly. So let's say we're focused on ed endings. Okay, so they would find the verbs walk, ask, help, walked, helped, helped, and then they would comment on how the ed endings affects the verbs. Well, in this case, it gives them all a past tense usage. They're used in the past tense. Students can also write sentences containing the words with the suffix or the root. They can focus on cognates if it's applicable. So if you're working with a student who speaks Pashto, there's not really going to be cognates. If you work with a student who speaks a Romance language like Spanish or French or Portuguese, you're going to have a ton of cognates. So let's look at this chart over here. So we've got these prefixes. We have dis, we have in, im, I guess that's the list. And these are applicable to both Spanish and English. So we could look at dislike, disgustar, okay, means like not like, right? Makes it a negative like. But the dis is something you can find in both English and Spanish. So if a student can identify that dis is has the same meaning in Spanish and English, then they can start to apply it when they're reading words in English because it's something they're already familiar with from their native language. So teaching these cognates really increases the speed at which they can acquire language.